Hi, my name is Lydia. Welcome to my channel. Thank you so much for clicking on this video. If you are interested in true crime like I am, I hope you stick around. A special thank you and a hello to all my returning subscribers. I am so happy to have you here. Thank you so much for all the nice comments you've left on my videos recently. It warms my cold true crime heart to get to interact with you all. And when we discuss the case in the comments below, I always see a viewpoint that I hadn't seen before, and I so appreciate your thoughtful views. And I'm getting to know you all a little bit, so that's so much fun. I love this little community that we're building, and I love to see it grow bit by bit. I've been a bit sick lately, and I've been busy with other life things going on. May and June tend to be a busy time in this household with the end of school, so I'm a bit later than I had wanted to be with this video, so I apologize for that. I try to get out a new true crime video at least every 1 to 2 weeks. This one's a little bit later than normal, but I do hope that I will be able to increase my frequency sometime in the next few months. Because, as you know, I love talking about true crime. And if you didn't know, I also love posting videos of my cats. So no big surprise, but there'll be a couple cat clips at the end of this video as well. And if you have never seen a cat drinking water with her paw, well, you're in for a treat because that happens in the video. So stay tuned to the end. Thank you so much. But you're not here to watch a cat video, I know that. You're here for a true crime story. So let's begin. This story is another sad one about yet another real piece of dung. A killer who liked his victims young and female. This killer's name is Robert Woodall. Let's begin. The case I'm bringing to you today starts back in 1997 in an idyllic little town of Greenville, Kentucky. Greenville was described as a, quote, picturesque area with a population of just over 30,000 in western Kentucky, a community in the purest sense of the word. Greenville was said to be the charming heart of Muhlenberg County, a place where everybody knew your name. It's the kind of town where everybody felt comfortable to leave their doors unlocked, and the community was a very tight-knit one. They were all invested in a town where they felt lucky to live. One such family, the Hansons, felt very proud of their town and in their community, and they were a tight-knit family unto themselves, and they were so proud of their daughter, 16-year-old Sarah. Her name is Sarah Hanson. And how could they not be proud of Sarah? Sarah, at only 16 years old, was an honor student at Muhlenberg South High School, where she was described as being popular and loved. Sarah was involved in school activities as a cheerleader and a band member. And, as if that wasn't enough, Sarah also won medals in swimming and diving. As for Sarah's demeanor, she was seen to be smiling and upbeat, as her friends would describe her beautifully in this way. They said Sarah would always take the time out of her day to make sure that the kid that was treated poorly at home was having a good day at school. She made sure to greet everyone with a warm smile and a hello, even if her own day was not going so great. And that was just the kind of girl that Sarah Hanson was, a ray of sunshine. I wish we didn't have some dark clouds on the horizon for Sarah. As for Sarah's family, they were valued members of the Greenville community. Sarah's father, Alan Hanson, was the high school's beloved choral director. Her mother, Julie Hanson, was also a teacher in the school district, teaching music, and her brother was described as a gifted musician. The whole Hanson family were a musical bunch, that's for sure. As a family, they figuratively and literally made life beautiful for one another and for their community before one day in January, their whole lives would come crumbling down. January 25th, 1997, in Greenville, Kentucky, was described to be a very blustery day with frigid temperatures. It was an even colder evening. Sarah walked out of her house, located on Hobsonville Street in Greenville, Kentucky at around 7:30 p.m., and she got into the driver's side front seat alone of a 1990 GMC Safari van that belonged to her father. She wanted to rent a video. Do you remember when going out to a store to rent a video was a thing? That was a thing to do back in the day in the 1990s, right? So Sarah headed to the local mini-mart where they rented videos there. The mini-mart was located at 349 North Main Street. It was just around the corner from her house, so it was no big deal. She would be back soon, she said. Once inside at the mini-mart, Sarah hustled around looking for the video that she wanted, and then she took the videotape up to the cash register to pay for the rental. The cashier handed her her rental receipt, gave her the videotape, and Sarah left the store, never to be seen alive again. Back at Sarah's house, her parents were waiting for her. They knew that her trip to the mini-mart would really only take a few minutes. It was just around the corner. So when she did not come back right away, they were confused. She hadn't said that she planned to stop anywhere else, and she hadn't called to say she had car trouble, so where was Sarah? And as time ticked on, it became later and later in the evening, and now Sarah's parents were really concerned. And in a day and age when cell phones were not really a normal thing for everyone to have, they began to wonder what had happened, and they began to make phone calls to her friends. Did Sarah perhaps have a visit to one of them that they hadn't known about? Did they have any idea where Sarah was? They just began to search. But with every phone call they made, their questions created more uncertainty. None of Sarah's friends had heard from Sarah that day. Sarah's parents had gone to the mini-mart to check with the cashier if Sarah had been in there, and yes, the cashier confirmed that she had. She showed Sarah's parents the register receipt saying that Sarah had been in the store. The receipt revealed that she had signed it only a few minutes after she had arrived at the store, and the cashier assumed that she had left the store immediately upon getting her receipt and leaving with her video. The cashier had no idea what had happened to Sarah afterwards. By around 10 p.m. that night in January, Sarah Hansen had been missing for almost 3 hours. Greenville was not a big community, and since it carried the reputation that everybody knew everybody, it should not have been an impossible task to find Sarah, but no one had seen her, and the search seemed to take on a foreboding sense that something horrible had happened. And because of this impending sense of doom, Sarah's parents, rightly so, called the Greenville Police Department. At 10:42 p.m., the call came in, and immediately afterward, a search for Sarah Hansen began. At 10:50 p.m., with the search well underway already, which is very good to hear because that is not always the case in these police departments. It's very good to hear that they were so responsive and performed the search right away after they got the call. Authorities soon spotted Sarah's van. The van that Sarah had borrowed from her father was parked near a gravel boat ramp on the east side of Lake Luzerne, just over a mile from the mini-mart. And as officers approached the van, they observed what would later be measured to be about a 500-foot-long trail of blood. The trail of blood led from the van all the way down to the edge of the lake and into the shallow waters of the lake itself. And that's where they found Sarah's partially clothed dead body floating in the shallow water near the dam on Lake Luzerne. As officers quickly removed Sarah's body from the water, they hoped that perhaps she could be revived. Perhaps she had gone into the water, maybe she had not quite drowned, maybe that she could be saved. But unfortunately, when they examined her body, they saw that that was not the case. Something more sinister and tragic had occurred to Sarah. This was not an accident, not an accidental drowning for some reason or another. Sarah Hansen had been murdered. The following information in regards to Sarah Hansen's injuries will be graphic, so be warned. Officers immediately noticed that Sarah's throat had been cut several times so traumatically that her windpipe had been severed. Her body appeared to have been badly beaten, and later they would discover water in her lungs, which would prove that Sarah had ultimately drowned after suffering a horrendous beating and having her throat cut viciously. With what they had discovered, the Greenville Police Department quickly shifted gears from a lost and missing girl into a murder case. Now it was a full-blown homicide investigation. Sarah's body was now a crime scene, and so was the location of where Sarah had been found. A comprehensive autopsy was conducted, and the injuries that Sarah sustained became even more gruesome. In addition to having her windpipe slashed twice, with each cut measuring approximately 3.5 to 4 inches long, being physically beaten and drowned while she was still hanging on to the last of her life, Sarah was also sexually assaulted. The location where Sarah was found was also being processed for evidence, and investigators clearly made this a priority. The van that Sarah had borrowed from her father was processed, and the DNA and the fingerprints that did not belong to the usual family members were taken to be analyzed. The police hoped to find a hit on any of the fingerprints and DNA that they had discovered from the van that weren't from Sarah or her parents or her brother. The 500-foot-long blood trail that had originated at the van had shown that there were drag marks alongside of it. Sarah's body had been dragged from the van all the way down to the water's edge. She had been dumped unceremoniously into the water. And after a careful examination of the area where Sarah's body had ultimately been found, lying in the water, it was discovered that there was a footprint on a nearby pier in close proximity to the lake's edge. It was this footprint which would be a great piece of evidence for the case that was going to be built against our killer, Robert. After collecting all the strong evidence that they could find that clearly connected Sarah Hansen to her murderer, the investigators began analyzing it all with the one goal in mind: finding the killer of Sarah Hansen. The whole community seemed to be holding its breath in anticipation of revealing the identity of the murderer of Sarah Hansen, and in retrospect, they were not too surprised when it was revealed who the killer was. The DNA, the fingerprints, the shoe print that were all connected to Sarah Hansen's abduction, her sexual assault, and her murder were linked to one person, one suspect, Robert Woodall. Robert Woodall was described as a Greenville local with a reputation for being obsessed with sex and a penchant for predatory behavior. Robert was in the convenience store, that mini-mart, on January 25, 1997, and when he saw Sarah, it was a crime of opportunity. When he saw her, he made the quick decision that he would abduct her and sexually assault her. As soon as she left the relatively safe haven of the convenience store, Sarah Hansen was in Robert's world now, and she would become his victim. And just to make this story a little bit worse, well, okay, a lot worse, this was not Robert's first rodeo. Of course it wasn't. Robert had been recently released from jail after serving 3.5 years of a 5-year sentence for the sexual assault of a 9-year-old girl. 9 years old. How could that be, you might be wondering, had he been given such a light sentence of 5 years and only served 3.5 of them for assaulting a victim so young? I don't know. I have no explanation. Wrong place, wrong time, and I do feel so sorry for that 9-year-old victim as well. I really hope that she went on to live a good life and that she could put that event behind her. I hope. I don't know her name. I wish her a good life. However it happened, Robert was set free after only a few years of assaulting the 9-year-old girl. So the question remained, and it's a very important question. What was the protocol to monitor Robert Woodall once he had been released? Who was watching Robert? And how had he been permitted to strike so viciously and soon after his release? Why did Sarah Hansen have to die? Obviously was not enough supervision, because it was only a little under 1 year after his release that Robert attacked Sarah. He had both repeated and escalated his crimes with tragic results. And no one who knew this violent offender should have been surprised. A deeper look into Robert's criminal history would reveal that Robert had been charged with 3 counts of sexual abuse against 3 other young girls prior to his sentencing for that sexual assault on the 9-year-old girl. Court documents showed that Robert Woodall had pleaded guilty in 1993 to those 2 counts of first-degree sexual abuse. Those charges had been dismissed due to the lack of the quality of evidence, according to Muhlenberg Commonwealth's attorney. Nonetheless, Robert still had violent sexual tendencies that were escalating, and he should have been monitored constantly since he was a grave and an immediate danger to public safety. It is just so tragic to realize that if this violent sex offender had been treated properly by the criminal justice system, Sarah Hansen might still be alive. And this is often the case, as we know. People slip through the cracks, they are left to their own devices, and sometimes tragedy ensues. But back to our story of Sarah Hansen. Once Robert had become the clear suspect in Sarah's murder, the police brought him in for questioning. Robert revealed that he indeed was in the mini-mart on the night of January 25, 1997, but he gave 2 conflicting statements about where he went after he was in the convenience store. The police also observed that Robert, in fact, was wearing the same brand of tennis shoe of the shoe print that they had found on the pier near the lake where Sarah's body had been found. Yeah, he was wearing the same shoe. Not the brightest killer, this one. And Robert's fingerprints were all over the van that Sarah had been driving on the night of her murder. Robert left plenty of evidence to be found. Back at Robert's own home, blood had been found near his front door, and muddy and wet clothing was found under his bed. The blood on his clothing and on his sweatshirt was consistent with the blood type of the victim. And the DNA on the vaginal swabs taken from Sarah's body matched Robert Woodall's DNA. Robert's fingerprints were identified on the glass and the door of the van, as well as the interior door jamb and on the handle. Robert's goose was cooked. He had left himself all over the crime scene. And with all of this clear-cut evidence pointing to Robert Woodall with neon flashing arrows, how did Robert plead to the charges of abduction, sexual assault, and murder? You guessed it, Robert pled innocent to all 3 charges. On March 18, 1997, a grand jury quickly and easily indicted Robert on the charges of abduction, sexual assault, and murder. And at the conclusion of his fairly quick trial, Robert Woodall was sentenced to death on September 8, 1997. He received his death sentence in Caldwell County, Kentucky, for capital murder, capital kidnapping, and first-degree rape. And you would think that that would be the end of this gruesome case. Surely they got the right guy. He was put in jail, lock him away for good, eventually put him to death. But of course, the legal proceedings carried on, as they normally do, and that's how it went for Robert Woodall. Robert's original sentencing of his case was being contested in the most creative of ways, citing everything from raw deer violations to assertions that his low IQ precluded him from a death sentence. Yes, Robert Woodall did have a low IQ, but he did know right from wrong, and he did know that he had committed a crime. He did know that he committed murder, and he did know that he had committed rape. Low IQ was not an excuse. But Robert's attorneys wanted him to be precluded from a death sentence because of the low IQ.
A first for Muhlenberg County. For the first time, a local case is being heard by the U.S. Supreme Court. Justices will consider whether to allow a new sentencing hearing for a man who has confessed to killing 16-year-old Sarah Hansen back in 1997. Western Kentucky reporter Jess Rates with the story.
This is the first time in history a case from Muhlenberg County has gone to the U.S. Supreme Court.
Today, the U.S. Supreme Court heard the 1997 Kentucky death penalty case against Robert Keith Woodall. Justices will decide in the next few months whether Woodall, because of an error, deserves a new sentencing, while prosecutors fight for the death penalty.
I can tell you almost minute for minute what happened on January the 25th, 1997.
16-year-old star athlete, student, and cheerleader.
She was just about a perfect kid.
It was the moment Greenville was smacked with reality.
This is not Mayberry. It can happen in any small town.
Robert Woodall admitted to raping and murdering Sarah. The memory of finding her body still haunts one Greenville police officer.
We've had cases before. We've had murder cases here in the county, but nothing that devastated the whole community like this. This was an innocent 16-year-old girl.
The lead KSP investigator took it personal.
I'm from this community. I knew the family. I knew the victim. It occurred less than a mile from my home.
Family, citizens, and investigators want what they haven't had for 17 years.
If it comes to a point where the U.S. Supreme Court reverses the Sixth Circuit and reinstates the death penalty, I think it will give the family and this community and a lot of us closure.
One of the pillars of the Greenville community is faith, represented by this statue funded by the Sarah Hansen Fund and less than a mile from where she was taken. Now 17 years have culminated into this day in court, but the community says they have to have faith in the justice system and, more importantly, faith in each other. From Greenville, Jess Rates, 14 News.
And while those arguments were temporarily successful, with Robert's death sentence being overturned, eventually and in the end, the U.S. Supreme Court recommended reinstating the death sentence for Robert Woodall for the crime of Sarah Hansen's murder. And today, Robert Keith Woodall can be found residing in a Kentucky state prison on death row, with his sentence being reinstated. As with any tragedy, we always hope that something positive, anything really, can be found after such a great loss. And in a way, it did, even in this case. In 1998, former Kentucky Governor Paul Patton created and introduced Sarah Hansen's Law. It was meant to tighten the law regarding treatment and supervision of sex offenders. And why is this effort notable? Well, at the time in the 1990s, convicted sex offenders received little to no sex crime-specific treatment in jail, and what treatment did exist was voluntary. Voluntary. Really? Who was going to volunteer for that? So once Robert was released from jail, after his laughably short sentence and after he was given time off for quote-unquote good behavior, the state registry that tracked sex offenders was limited due to Robert's conviction date being before the start of the sex offender registry's formation in July 1994. There was no sex offender list when Robert was released from jail. He was not being tracked at all. He was a sex offender just on the loose, as it was. Obviously, this was a tragic loss of life. Sarah Hansen's family should not have been the ones to bear the brunt of this evil man's doings. But her death can be remembered as having inspired much-needed change involving violent predators of vulnerable citizens of society so that other lives might be saved as a result. In her death, in her tragic and unfortunate death, Sarah likely saved so many others. Rest in peace, Sarah Hansen. Thank you for your time in watching this video. I know that your time is valuable, and I am so glad that you chose to spend some of it watching this true crime case with me. Please let me know what you thought about this case in the comments below. You know I love to discuss it with you, and I reply to each and every one. If you have made it all the way to the end of this video, I appreciate it even more. I know this was a short one. If you're still here, just like in my last few recent videos, if you would please leave a red and a black heart in honor of the murder victim of this story, Sarah Hansen. Like I said before, I know this story was a little bit on the short side. Sometimes I have a longer video for you. Sometimes it will have to be a little bit more brief. I have been researching a couple cases that are very interesting, and they will be longer videos, so stay tuned for them. More to come. If you would like to hear more true crime cases from me, I would appreciate it if you consider subscribing. And until next time, everyone, until I see you again, as always, please take care. Bye now.